Chapter 520. Following that furious roar filled with murderous intent, the pain and fear that had been affecting and suppressing Lu Cheng's ice mirror suddenly rolled in and dissipated. The surrounding light dimmed eerily, as though dark clouds had risen from the ground. Gusts of chilly wind blew. The wind howled and condensed, pouring into Muko Yamashita's body in an instant. An exaggerated repulsive force expanded outwards, forming an invisible barrier. Boom! Lu Cheng's punch landed. Red and white flames rolled out, dispersing the invisible force field. However, this was only half done. The further his fist moved, the slower its speed became. It was as though he had fallen into an invisible swamp. In the end, he couldn't move an inch, suspending half a foot in front of his opponent's abdomen. Everything seemed to have frozen. Once the force field was retracted, the magnetic field behind Muko Yamashita distorted, revealing a blurry black shadow that was holding a blade with both hands and hanging in front of its chest. Its body was burning with blood-red fog. It took a step forward and truly overlapped with Muko Yamashita, no longer distinguishable. The dark and gloomy Buddhist temple and the desolate wilderness suddenly brightened up, bearing the fiery glow of the sunset. Some parts were flowing with gold, while others were dazzling red. The red glow didn't just come from the horizon, it also came from Muko Yamashita. He was like a general soaked in blood, locking his gaze on Lu Cheng. At this moment, Lu Cheng suddenly felt a sense of danger. It was as if he was facing an existence that could seriously injure him. From the electric current in his tailbone caused by the absolute reaction, to the clear and accurate reflection and judgment of the ice mirror, to his supernatural ability to foresee the future in a short period of time, all of them were clamoring for him to dodge quickly and avoid the sharp edge. He didn't want to face the terrifying attack head-on, so that his body wouldn't be damaged. Muko Yamashita's attack that was about to explode was definitely stronger than the sure-kill Seven Sins Hadouken. It was a killer move that he had to use a special environment and preemptive preparation to complete. And it could only be used once. Lu Cheng's body jerked instinctively. His muscles and fascia were accumulating strength, ready to spring out. This allowed him to leap 10 to 20 meters, causing his opponent's ultimate attack to miss and truly turn the tables. But at this time, a few incoherent thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. This should be the extreme Hadu sect, which was similar to the Shura kill of the physical invulnerability experts. After the attack was launched, the speed would increase, and the power would increase with the accumulation of kinetic energy until it exceeded the effective range. With Muko Yamashita's current level, even if he had a breakthrough in his wave of killing intent, even if he had other support, he wouldn't be able to unleash the full potential of this move. He had just taken 30 blows of Emperor Yen force combined with the eruption of his Dan Qi. Even if his killing intent could eliminate, neutralize, and defend against most of the explosive impact, the accumulated injuries would not be light. His body's endurance had decreased. His offense was strong, but his defense was weak. If I were to fall back into the previous situation, I wouldn't be able to use the encountering gods in the void self-reflection to consecutively unleash the simplified fighting formula to turn the tables. At that time, his bodily functions would be eroded by the killing intent, and the outcome would be irreversible. In a split second, Lu Cheng didn't think too much about it. He didn't hesitate and made a decision in an instant. He trusted his own knowledge, vision, and experience. He didn't blindly follow absolute reaction, ice mirror, and supernatural ability. Bam! He suddenly pushed his feet inward, shaking the foundation of the Buddhist hall a little. In his mind, he had already visualized the heavy, scorching Emperor Yen with a simple crown. The fire force in his body accumulated layer by layer, continuously compressing and condensing into a small ball, blazing white and returning to blue. As the fire force that had undergone mutation at the inhuman stage was heavier, purer, and more condensed, the process was relatively fast and didn't take much effort. Following which, the god of fire Zhurong, who had the head of a beast and the body of a human, stepped through the void, controlling the highly condensed ball of fire and preventing it from exploding. The red fog around Muko Yamashita, as thick as blood, emitted a bright red light, enveloping him completely. As his fist charged forward, it slashed out with a swoosh. It was like a giant scythe from the sea of blood, hell, or the Grim Reaper. Compared to the Seven Sins Hadu fist, this strike was much sharper and filled with murderous intent, as though it could cut everything in its path into two. Seven Sins Hadu fist's killing intent, Azura kill. As soon as the bloody light appeared, Lu Cheng completed the seemingly complicated but smooth movements of twisting his ankles, twisting his knees, twisting his hips, wrapping his waist, and other movements. He swung his arms, holding a faint blazing white light in his hands. His fist fell from the sky, heavy, strong, and ferocious. Emperor Yen Force Internal Explosion Fist. Boom. Before the bloody light could accelerate, it was hit by Lu Cheng's fist. Force was injected into it, producing an exaggerated deafening sound. If it wasn't for the cold winter, a flock of frightened crows would have leaped from the roof of the abandoned Buddhist temple. Animals within a certain range of the desolate wilderness would have fled in panic. Boom. Explosions sounded continuously and the bloody light shone brightly. Lu Cheng felt a chill seeping into his body. His muscles stiffened and he was thrown out by the force like a violent storm. He heard many tiny parts of his body shattering and saw multiple internal injuries. The power of one blow was shocking. His consciousness looked down from above, like a deity looking at his body. Lu Cheng controlled the details and controlled his injuries while avoiding them. He switched to a way of exerting force with the least negative effect. He adjusted his center of gravity, bounced in midair and landed steadily. Other than his face being slightly paler than before, his shoes and clothes torn, he didn't show any signs of injury. Muko Yamashita, at the entrance of the Buddhist temple, was trembling slightly. There was even some blood seeping out from the corners of his mouth, eyes, and nose. His accumulated injuries were completely triggered by the internal explosion. Lu Cheng believed that his injuries were more serious than his. However, due to their different levels of control over their bodies, it looked like the difference between heaven and earth. At this moment, his eyelids twitched. Muko Yamashita's figure was reflected in his pupils. He raised his hands and was about to form a seal. Wholeness formula. He had to recover his stamina and spirit, suppress his injuries and seek the final victory. Lu Cheng focused his mind and circulated his qi and blood. Relying on his precise control over his body, he simplified the process of the army formula. He didn't use any seals but only released his aura. He shouted the ancient sound before Muko Yamashita finished. Army. The temple suddenly darkened. The murderous aura of the army from the ancient battlefield was triggered. In an instant, it turned into shadows and pounced on Muko Yamashita along with Lu Cheng's spirit. Previously on the plain, when he predicted that they might encounter an ancient battlefield, he had already considered whether the power, effect, and distance of the army formula would be enhanced as a result. The answer was yes. At this moment, Muko Yamashita's body turned cold. He felt that his limbs and head were entangled by the army spirit that had died tragically. He couldn't break free. He saw Itachi slashing horizontally about to land on his neck. The scene of his head flying up and blood spurting out was playing out. No! He cried out in fear. The preparation of the wholeness formula was in vain. At this moment, Lu Cheng had already gathered his qi and blood, spirit and force in his lower abdomen, using this to dispel and suppress most of the negative effects. Then when his Dan Qi exploded, he planned the path of exertion that would have the least impact on his injuries. With a push of his legs, he pounced in front of Muko Yamashita. He swung his left fist sideways, bringing along blazing flames that were close to white. He delivered a ferocious swing punch. This was the boxing technique of the Jiruga sect. Using it here would put the least burden on the body and was also the most suitable for the situation. Bam! Muko Yamashita pulled his arm and raised it to parry in time. However, his body was blown up by the explosion of Emperor Yen Force. The blood mist became thinner, and the spreading flames seemed to stick to the red glow on the surface of his body, absorbing nutrients and burning continuously. Lu Cheng's eyes were clear and sparkling, as though there were two mirrors made of ice, reflecting his opponent completely without any emotion. Bam! He gathered his qi and blood and swung his right fist again. The flames were heavy and it was a half-step punch. When Muko Yamashita managed to parry, he took a step forward, bent his right elbow and smashed it down ferociously. Bam 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 bam. After a series of moves, Lu Cheng suddenly turned forward and swung his left arm backward. Like a burning steel whip, he whipped it viciously between Muko Yamashita's raised arms, causing his shoulders to tremble and he staggered backwards. With a sliding step, Lu Cheng's right fist rushed forward. It was so fast that it looked like it was about to fly, leaving his opponent with no choice but to parry in haste. This time there was no explosion, no burning. A cold, chilling sensation invaded Muko Yamashita's body, causing him to shiver. Much of his boiling murderous intent and bloodlust faded away, and his mind became clear. Once the extreme emotions of his opponent weakened, Lu Cheng immediately spread his arms apart and started attacking from both sides. Bam 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 bam. The friction created red flames, causing Muko Yamashita to be completely flustered. After fighting for a while, his storm-like combination of punches suddenly stopped. He turned his waist and back quickly and whipped his leg horizontally. Bam! His leg landed on Muko Yamashita's palms, which he could only block hastily, and bounced them back, crashing into his body. Bam! Muko Yamashita was sent flying, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard from his body. He spat out a mouthful of uncontrollable blood, and his eyes were filled with confusion. Lu Qing straightened his back and was about to pounce again, but the skinny old man wearing the bamboo hat had somehow blocked in front of Muko Yamashita, announcing the end of the match. The winner was self-evident. Lu Qing won. Muko Yamashita fell to the ground. He saw Lu Qing, who was a few steps away, calmly saluting him with his usual expression. He turned around as if he wasn't affected by the battle, and slowly walked away barefooted. This scene made Muko Yamashita's heart sink deeper and deeper. He could no longer see the light of day and no hope. I used everything I had and borrowed external strength, but I was still no match for him. And he seemed to be having it easy. Leaving the Buddhist temple, Lu Qing walked for a while in the desolate wilderness. After confirming that his figure was no longer within the range of Muko Yamashita and the old man wearing the bamboo hat, he let out a sigh of relief and slowed down his precise control of his body. After relaxing, his footsteps suddenly became weak and he almost fell. "Senior, please pass me my phone." Lu Qing blushed and looked at the divine enchanter of Sin Flame who was walking silently beside him. "P.S. Please recommend me." Chapter 521. Inherited from the same lineage. The divine enchanter of Sin Flame finally spoke, giving a brief evaluation of Lu Qing's previous performance. Lu Qing could only reply with a dry laugh. He silently took the phone and sent a message to xianxia. "Done. Just as we expected, it's really an ancient battlefield. I'll be able to teach you the wholeness formula in the new year." In Connecticut, America, the night was dark and silent. Xianxia's room suddenly rang with an exaggerated message notification. She opened her eyes in a daze and picked up the phone. Faint dimples immediately appeared on her cheeks. She forced herself to reply with a blushing and smiling emoji and adjusted the settings so as not to disturb her rest. After doing all this, she fell down and turned around. Hugging a small part of the quilt, she fell asleep sweetly. The corners of her mouth seemed to be curled up, as if she was having a pleasant dream. Lu Qing smiled when he saw the reply. He put away his phone, grabbed his backpack and found a pair of casual running shoes. He picked up a woolen shirt and put them on slowly. Other than his trousers, which were a little torn, there was no trace of a battle on his body. In public, with a senior expert around, he still had some sense of shame and didn't take off his pants on the spot. He could still wear them anyway. Putting on a down jacket and carrying his backpack, Lu Qing controlled the healing of his internal injuries and slowly walked forward using only his legs. Just then, the divine enchanter of Sin Flame passed the rubbing of the wholeness formula to him and said in a hoarse voice, "Return it to me when you return to China." According to the boastful words of Shi Jianghu, his disciple could master any of the 9 words formulas in minutes and leave him far behind. Sure. Lu Qing didn't find it difficult and accepted the rubbing without hesitation. Along the way, he didn't cultivate directly because he couldn't be distracted. He only carefully observed the ancient shape of the wholeness formula and the essence it contained to get a feel for it. After checking into the hotel that night, he finally had some free time. He sat cross-legged on the bed and placed the rubbings in front of him. He closed his eyes and sketched out the ancient characters while chanting. It was similar to the process of cultivating the 9 words formula in the past. His jindan was triggered, leading to vibrations and ripples. It was resplendent and took shape, engraving the charm of the wholeness formula into his mind. But this time it didn't change. Only the corresponding fragment appeared as usual. Jia. Lu Qing's deep voice reverberated in the room. It seemed to contain a sense of lofty mystery. He was changing his hand seals to test the internal training effects of the wholeness formula. After a while, he opened his eyes and nodded slightly. He already had a grasp of the situation. The normal use of the wholeness formula stimulated the corresponding parts of the body, causing the secretion of hormones, invigorating the mind and rejuvenating the body. It was similar to stabbing the thigh with a knife, using the excruciating pain in exchange for the activation of the body's protective mechanism. It cleared the mind instantly and filled the body with strength. Of course, compared to the crude method of stabbing the thigh, it was more technical. The stimulation was more targeted and the effects were better and more obvious. It lived up to its name as a secret art. I can only use it once a day. Even with the simplified version of self-reflection, I can only use it 3 times at most. And if I reach the limit, I'll feel weak and won't be able to get good feedback for a long time. The mental and physical strength I recover with the wholeness formula will decrease more easily than usual. Lu Qing seriously pondered the characteristics of the secret art. When used for internal training, it'll shake the body and indirectly affect the brain. It'll allow the body to recover faster and faster as time goes by. The effects of deep sleep will also improve. In other words, I'll need 6 to 7 hours of rest before I fully master the wholeness formula. 4 hours will be enough or even less. Lu Qing couldn't help but feel disappointed at the thought. Just a few years ago, his favorite leisure activity was still sleeping in. Everyone said that it was a waste to sleep in during the holidays. He had always thought that it was a waste not to sleep in during the holidays. But after he started practicing martial arts, he bid farewell to sleeping in. He no longer enjoyed it. Now, it seemed that his afternoon naps could be shortened to half an hour, and his sleep time at night could be reduced by a third or even more. This is good too. I feel like I'm living longer than others and can do more things. Lu Qing's thoughts wandered. For some reason, he suddenly thought of Ku's shameful and angry scolding. Hooligan. He coughed lightly and stopped his thoughts. With a smile, he picked up his phone and shared the effects and characteristics of the wholeness formula with xianxia. In the end, he said righteously, "This way you can learn more easily." Yes. Xianxia nodded happily. The next morning after training, Lu Qing met up with the divine enchanter of Sin Flame and handed him the rubbing. "Senior, I'm done." The divine enchanter of Sin Flame looked at him for a full 5 seconds before reaching out and taking the rubbing. Lu Qing handed over the task and felt relieved. He was more hopeful about the future. In a little over a year, he had collected 6 words of the 9 words formula, which was 2/3 complete. There were still a few years to go before Master's old injuries completely relapsed and his body collapsed. There was still a lot of hope. Why am I thinking about the good instead of the bad? Maybe I don't need to collect all the 9 words formulas and Master's old injuries will be healed because of the advancement of technology and martial arts. Judging from the situation of the Jindan, one of the remaining 9 words formulas should be used for healing. They didn't talk on the way. In the afternoon, they arrived at Haidong Airport and went their separate ways. Lu Qing didn't rush home. Instead, he took the high-speed rail to Wuxialover. He planned to pay his respects to Master and burn incense at the sect. He wouldn't come back on the first day of the new year. In Shi Yuejian's villa, Geezer Shi held an exquisite wine pot engraved with the word fighting. He looked at his disciple and clicked his tongue. That old geezer Sin Flame said you have a solid foundation and a lot of experience. Senior, you flatter me, Lu Qing said humbly. That old geezer doesn't usually praise people. Geezer Shi waved his hand, happy that his reputation had increased. To be able to defeat an opponent of the same level who had comprehended the killing intent in an environment set up by the opponent in advance, you didn't disgrace this old man. He paused for a moment and said, your ice mirror has reached the level of encountering gods in the void self-reflection. If you want to go further in the inhuman stage, it's almost impossible. How about this? Tomorrow when we go to the sect, I'll give you 3 days to study the physical invulnerability chapters of the ice sect. How much you can comprehend will depend on yourself. Study the physical invulnerability chapters of the ice sect? Lu Qing was shocked at first, but then he was overjoyed. Before attaining the external connection with heaven and earth, it was impossible to master the 9 unique arts. However, it was still possible to comprehend something from them and draw parallels. Didn't Peng Liyun imitate and create 2 martial arts by referencing 9 heavens ensemble, and thunder from a clear sky, cloudless thunder blade? Although they weren't simplified physical invulnerability, they were still quite extraordinary. Moreover, they were faster and more suitable for the user. In Peng Liyun's hands, they weren't much worse than Thunder Seal or Fiery Thunderbolt. Did Master acknowledge my accumulation and experience? Thank you, Master. Lu Qing blurted out. Geezer Shi glared at him and said, why don't I see you thanking me usually? Master, I keep my gratitude in my heart. I only express 1/10 of it. Lu Qing had learned a lot from Talker, so he tried to diffuse the situation with a smile. The next morning in the Songtao Pavilion of the Ice God sect, Lu Qing sat on the balcony, his eyes reflecting the pine forest and green sea. However, a clear image of his body appeared in his mind. His flesh wriggled and stopped the wounds, healing them quickly one by one. After an unknown period of time, he felt that the internal injuries from the battle with Muko Yamashita were at least half healed under the effects of the pills and self-reflection. I'll be fully healed in 2 or 3 days. Lu Qing exhaled. His ears twitched as he heard deliberately light and silent footsteps approaching. He stood up slowly, withdrew his aura, and walked slowly to the door. After waiting for a dozen seconds, there was a sudden knock on the door. Lu Qing reached out and pulled open the door. Mo Jingting's curled fingers froze in midair as though she was shocked. "Hello, junior martial uncle." She quickly regained her senses. Her misty eyes, which seemed to lack focus, were filled with smiles. "Sect leader martial uncle is looking for me?" Lu Qing went straight to the point. "Yeah, he's waiting for you at the Ice Queen Pavilion." Mo Jingting looked at the increasingly unfathomable little martial uncle and added with a smile. "He wants to bring you to the restricted area of the sect to observe the unique physical invulnerability moves." "Alright, sorry to trouble you." Lu Qing smiled courteously, walked out of the room, closed the door, and walked along the corridor towards the Ice Queen Pavilion. Mo Jingting followed behind, looking at his back as he lowered his head and typed on his phone. She suddenly felt a little envious and emotional. Little martial uncle is really becoming more and more like an expert, except when he's playing on his phone. Why didn't martial granduncle bring him back to the sect earlier? At the Ice Queen Pavilion, sect leader He stood near the entrance. He smiled at Lu Qing and said, "You've really made us wrong again and again. This old man originally thought that you would only be able to observe next year." "Thank you for the compliment, sect leader martial uncle." Lu Qing bowed, a little embarrassed. "Let's go." He turned around and led Lu Qing to the basement level. As they walked, he explained, "Don't be greedy. You're still at the inhuman stage, so it's enough to focus on 2 or 3 moves when you observe. Otherwise, it'll take up too much energy and you won't be able to learn anything. You've made some progress in Ice Mirror, so the most suitable move for you is the 5th move, Enemy Heart Freezing move. Also, the 6th move, Ice Spirit Holy Light, and the 1st move, Eternal Ice Wall, are more suitable for you. According to your master, the 9th move, Vast Starry Sky, Absolute Frost, is closer to your understanding. It's a pity that this move has long been lost due to the chaos of war. Even with the alliance of several sects, they could only come up with a weakened version. I hope that one day you'll be able to innovate and perfect it and even surpass the past." Lu Qing listened attentively as he followed sect leader martial uncle through a long corridor and 3 thick heavy metal doors. Amidst the illusion that this place was very technologically advanced, they entered a hall that was shimmering with silvery white light. Before he could observe his surroundings, even with his strength and realm, he couldn't help but shiver. So cold. P.S. Today is the death anniversary of the Elder. I originally planned to write 3 chapters yesterday to free up some time in the afternoon. However, my typing speed wasn't ideal yesterday, so I didn't succeed. Facepalm. Chapter 522. The entire hall was covered in a cold silver color, as though it was made of special metal. Here it was filled with whistling cold winds, falling goose feathers, and sparkling crystals. It was so cold that it was like a place of 2 extremes. Yes, in the middle of the mountain, where it was isolated from the outside world, there was a terrifying snowstorm raging, as though it wanted to bury all living things. Lu Qing subconsciously circulated his flame force to warm his body. Looking around, he realized that the source of the snowstorm came from 9 paintings hanging in different positions. They were made of special materials like cloth or silk and had different charms. Some were dark and cold, some were covered in snow and wind, some were crystal clear and some were white. Together, they formed an illusory world of ice and snow. With so many objects with charms placed together, it was easy to attract and influence the outside world, forming a cycle. It was different from taking them out individually, where one could only sense them by touching them. Lu Qing nodded thoughtfully, his gaze sweeping the other places. At the corresponding positions of the 9 paintings, there was a stone platform on which different items were placed. Some were golden pages, some were crystal items, some were plain, and some were full of charm. The 9 stone platforms were like stars, surrounding a transparent cabinet in the center. Inside the cabinet was the ice essence bead, which seemed to be condensed by blue light. It was also the source of the unusual scene in this place. Different paintings correspond to different visualizations of different unique arts. The stone platforms below them have written descriptions of the practice, explanations of the moves, and the charms left behind by previous generations of physical invulnerability grandmasters. You can combine them and comprehend them. Don't blindly follow the visualizations. It's better to not have books than books. Martial arts are improved over time. He gave a brief explanation and smiled. Stay here for 3 hours every day. Don't force yourself. Don't think that you can withstand the harsh environment here just because you have Emperor Yen force. Be careful of the cold charms seeping into your bones. You may get arthritis for no reason, and it will affect your progress to physical invulnerability. Thank you for your advice, sect leader. I understand. I'll stay here from 1:30 to 4:30 every day. Lu Qing knew what was good for him and bowed sincerely. Good. Comprehension is up to you. I'll take my leave first. That's the enemy heart freezing move. The ice mirror is a simplified version of it. That's the ice spirit holy light, the ancestor of the ice burning. It comes with a set of saber and sword techniques. You can take a look and try to understand it. Even if you don't learn how to use weapons, you can still integrate it into your fists and legs. That's the eternal ice wall, a purely defensive martial art. But you youngsters have a broader mind, maybe you can come up with other uses. That's the boundless starry sky, one of the 2 killing moves of the ice sect. Since the thunder, fire, battle, and plague of the 5 sects of Taoism had condensed the physical invulnerability-related techniques into 9, many of the later generations imitated and categorized them. The 1st to 7th forms were physical invulnerability techniques with different effects, while the 8th and 9th forms were the most powerful killer moves. They were named differently to differentiate them. For example, the 8th form of the thunder sect, thunder from a clear sky, cloudless thunder blade; the 9th form of the fire sect, 9 rotations of 5 flames, descent of the sun; the 9th form of the fighting sect, wrath of the Dumu, heavenly punishment of the star palace; the 8th form of the plague sect, demons and monsters, road to the underworld; and the 9th form of the dark sect, dark devouring the sun, descent of the eternal night. The 8th and 9th forms of the ice spirit holy kung fu, also known as the ice sect's secret art, were frozen heaven and earth, eternally unchanging, and boundless starry sky, absolute frost, respectively. After giving the instructions, he didn't waste any more of Lu Cheng's time. He slowly walked out of the place and closed the heavy door, isolating the inside from the outside world. Lu Cheng weighed the pros and cons before striding towards the location of the enemy heart-freezing move. The ice mirror had already become the core of his martial arts. It would be best if he could understand and improve upon it. The painting seemed to be carved with a mirror made of ice crystals, but if one looked closely, they would find that it seemed to be more like a transparent heart with all 7 orifices. As the cold fog around it shrank and expanded, it seemed to come alive and was beating. Lu Cheng tried to understand it directly, but to no avail. Then he flipped through the text descriptions, diagrams, secret manuals, notes left behind by the predecessors, and the insights left behind by the ancestral masters. He went through them one by one, seriously and attentively. When he had a grasp of the overall situation and had a certain level of understanding, he walked back to the front of the visualization diagram. Once again he entered meditation and tried to comprehend it calmly. 3 hours passed quickly. Lu Cheng woke up from the cold with his flame force circulating naturally. His body was shivering uncontrollably. It's been a long time since I had this feeling. No wonder Master only gave me 3 days. Otherwise, even if I only came here for 3 hours a day, I wouldn't be able to take it. I would have to wait for at least 10 days to half a month before I can enter this place again. Lu Cheng transformed his flame force into Emperor Yen and stopped shivering. He waited patiently for He to open the door as though nothing had happened. As for the enemy heart-freezing move, he didn't understand much due to his low realm. He only vaguely understood that not only could it be used to control one's body, but it was also the nemesis of negative emotions. It could also be used to connect with the outside world. Within a certain range, one could see the enemy's emotions and changes in their muscles. In other words, the god, who looked down on him, could also see his opponent. Based on this, Lu Cheng had a preliminary idea of how to train after the ice mirror. On the 2nd day he comprehended the ice spirit holy light. This was a unique skill that strengthened the ice spirit force. It could be released without dissipating, and it could be condensed into blades and swords. It was a set of moves and techniques. Lu Cheng couldn't understand the essence of the technique, so he couldn't increase his force. However, with the support of encountering gods in the void, self-reflection, he could barely be considered a beginner. As for the bladesmanship and swordsmanship, he studied them seriously for quite some time. Combined with the notes of predecessors, he gained some insight into the simple changes. On the 3rd day he found a possible way to improve his ice armor from the compression and thickening of the Millennium Ice Wall. As this was a purely defensive technique, there weren't many details related to it. There was still an hour and a half before his comprehension came to an end. Since he had nothing to do, he walked to the incomplete version of the vast starry sky, absolute frost. Its background was dark, dotted with dozens of tiny, distant stars. The contrast between the two made the silence and coldness of the starry sky even more apparent. It was as though all heat no longer existed, and all civilizations had turned into tombs. Taking a closer look, Lu Qing found that there seemed to be another palm in the visualization diagram. It was a palm that encompassed the darkness and brought about eternal silence. It seemed both real and illusory, making it hard to grasp. After comprehending for a while, he still didn't gain anything. Lu Qing tried to taste it from another angle. Let's not talk about that palm for now. How do I create the absolute frost of the vast starry sky? In the vast universe, the temperature will naturally drop to a terrifying level in places far away from the stars. There's no need for other procedures. Imitating the martial arts of the stars, don't tell me I have to completely isolate the radiation of the sun or the spread of heat. Lu Qing thought aimlessly. He shivered as he activated the ice spirit force in an experimental manner. First, he used the principle of heat insulation to stack his force, leaving a gap in the outer layer to block the heat and increase the temperature of the core. However, he failed miserably. Following that, he expanded his force in an attempt to lower the temperature, but he still failed. Again and again, Lu Qing's fire could only last for less than a minute. Just like his previous attempts, he always failed. Seeing that there were still more than 10 minutes left, he gave up and stared at the visualization diagram again. The more he looked at it, the more he felt that it was very similar to the starry sky when he reached Dan equilibrium. It's very similar, Lu Qing thought, and a bold idea came to him. I can't feel the charm of the diagram, but I can directly imitate its state. Let's see if I can get some experience from it. Lu Qing immediately put his thoughts into action. He withdrew his qi and blood and balanced his ice and fire. The former was dark and cold, while the latter was heavy and hot. Together, they maintained the existence of the starry sky universe. For other Dan stage practitioners, they would have to expand their Dan force at this point. However, Lu Qing kept his consciousness at the top of the starry sky and controlled his fire force and qi and blood to shrink to the core, away from the darkness at the edge. This was to create a scene similar to the visualization diagram. This process was very difficult. When the contraction reached a certain level, Lu Qing, who was in the state of Dan equilibrium, didn't have enough strength to continue the operation. He repeated it over and over again, failing again and again. When he was nearing the end, he suddenly thought that he could find a helper, so he used force concentration again to shrink his fire force, qi and blood, and spirit. Just as he was about to reach his limit, Lu Qing suddenly triggered the Jin Dan in his lower abdomen and transferred a small amount of energy. The light instantly collapsed and sank into the core, distancing itself from the darkness. This allowed the starry sky to appear in a state similar to a visualization diagram. This state was out of balance and couldn't be maintained. Lu Qing suddenly exploded his Dan force and let the warmth return to his body. He then threw a cannon punch forward, pouring out the darkness. There was no cracking sound or banging sound. In front of his fist, large pieces of light blue ice crystals silently condensed in the void where the snow was falling. It was as if the air was solidified. This strange phenomenon disappeared in a flash. Lu Qing's whole body was sore and weak. He gasped for breath as he looked at the effect of the punch. He was a little happy. This power seems to be much stronger than the normal ice spirit force. I wonder if I can push it bit by bit without the help of the Jin Dan and achieve an effect of 30 to 40%? What should I call this self-created move? At this moment, the heavy metal door moved back and he walked in. Looking at Lu Qing, who was obviously not in good condition, he shook his head and laughed. You don't have to work so hard. This place is also yours. You'll have plenty of chances to come back in the future. Sooner or later you'll get something. I'm already getting something now. Lu Qing muttered and replied with a smile. Sect leader Martial Uncle is right. I'll keep this a secret until I can use a weaker version without the help of the Jin Dan. I'll let Taoist or Renli experience it in April. P.S. It's the end of the month. Looking for recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Chapter 523. Are you going to stay in the sect for a few more days or go home directly? He asked with a smile as he walked along the corridor with his hands behind his back. Lu Qing recalled that his senior sister had gone to Xuanhuan for a competition and his master had gone to a secret military base for periodic treatment. I've already booked the tickets. Okay. He walked up the stairs and into the main hall of the Ice Queen Pavilion. I'll get Jingting to send you to the airport. No need to trouble Marshal Nisimo. Any disciple will do. Lu Qing blurted out. He always felt uneasy around that crafty superstar. What if she made use of him and created a scandal? Wouldn't that hurt Ku's feelings? She's free right now. What trouble is there to talk about? He picked up the phone and called Mo Jingting over. Lu Qing couldn't refuse good intentions. Since what was done couldn't be undone, he didn't say anything else. He just had to keep his distance later. Also, After that concert, Mo Jingting had clearly restrained herself from doing anything that could cause misunderstandings. While waiting, he unlocked his phone and said to Xianxia with a big smile, "I've learned something from vast starry sky, absolute frost today. Who knows, I might be able to create some new moves." Since it was midnight and the girl was still asleep, Lu Qing didn't wait for a reply and added, "I plan to keep this a secret for now. We'll talk about it after I actually create something. Yeah, I can use this time to talk to Master about this and get some pointers." After a while, Mo Jingting arrived at the Ice Queen Pavilion with her car keys in hand. Her tight-fitting dark blue jeans accentuated her tall figure and slender legs. She casually put on a short beige jacket, and her straight hair casually draped over her shoulders. She looked more like a girl next door than a movie star. "Young martial uncle, aren't you going to have dinner before you leave?" She looked at everyone in a daze. Lu Qing's figure was reflected in her affectionate eyes. Lu Qing smiled politely. "I'm in a hurry. I'll eat at the airport." "Young martial uncle, you're so eager to go home." Mo Jingting teased him, acting like they were close friends. After getting into the car and fastening his seatbelt, Lu Qing recalled the past and explained to his wife with a snicker, "Sect leader martial uncle asked Mo Jingting to send me to the airport. Now that I know that the rearview mirror can be controlled, I won't make any mistakes." Mo Jingting skillfully started the engine. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Lu Cheng's upturned mouth. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Young martial uncle, what are you laughing at? Did I drive the wrong way?" "Driving posture. It's easy for people to misunderstand. Damn it, it's all those old drivers' fault for using the word driving so badly," Lu Qing thought to himself. He shook his head and laughed. "I'm sharing something interesting with my leader." Oh. Mo Jingting seemed to have understood and tactfully stopped talking about this topic. After the car drove for a while, she looked ahead and suddenly said, "Young martial uncle, do you think I have a chance of reaching the dance stage?" Lu Qing immediately felt like an elder. After thinking for a while, he replied, "You're only in your 20s. There's still a long way to go before your qi and blood deteriorates. If you can settle down and bear the pain, it's not impossible." Mo Jingting had been accepted as a disciple of the Ice God sect. She had reached the level of professional ninth pin at such a young age, which showed that her talent was not bad. However, her ambition was not there, which was why she had not made any progress for a long time. "After being in the entertainment circle for a few years, I realized that the dance stage is quite useful for me," Mo Jingting said with a smile. "For example, I can strengthen my control over my body. My expression and acting skills can improve rapidly. The same goes for the aura of my singing. Most importantly, I can lock my qi and blood, control my skin and muscles, and slow down my aging. I'm really interested in reaching the dance stage. If I encounter any difficulties, young martial uncle, you have to help me. Your master is more senior than me, and there's also the sect master. How can I help?" Lu Qing subconsciously rejected her request. Mo Jingting laughed softly and suddenly changed the topic. "Senior Zhu Tai has been at the inhuman stage for a long time, but he's still stuck at professional fifth pin. He's almost 30 years old, so there's almost no hope for him to reach the physical invulnerability stage. Junior Lei Feng is almost 25 years old, but he still hasn't refined his root pulp and made a breakthrough. If this drags on for another 2 years, I feel that even if he does reach the dance stage, he won't have much spirit left." Lu Qing listened quietly to Mo Jingting talk about the situation of the people in the sect, occasionally interrupting. They arrived at the airport in Shanghai in a harmonious manner. Waving goodbye, Mo Jingting watched his back as he entered the departure hall. She retracted her gaze, smiled faintly and sighed. She picked up another phone, opened WeChat and glanced at it. This was the number she used to test men. Back then, Lei Feng had a soft spot for this little senior sister and started a passionate pursuit. Mo Jingting was a little tempted and wanted to give it a try. However, after being in the entertainment industry for so many years, she was used to seeing the ugly faces of men. She specially got a number, found a full set of third-rate photos, and registered a new WeChat account. After adding her circle of friends, she sent a friend request to her junior brother, which was easily accepted. In the subsequent conversations, Lei Feng was even more flirtatious and vulgar, which allowed her to see a different side of her junior brother. Since then, Mo Jingting had given up on the idea and only maintained a relatively ambiguous relationship with Lei Feng, unwilling to take the next step. After hearing that Xianxia had gone abroad to study, she thought of how her little senior uncle would be all alone and unable to sleep. On a whim, she used this WeChat account to test him again, wanting to expose his fake serious face. However, she glanced at her phone screen again. Her repeated pleas were like stones sinking into the sea. There was no response. Mo Jingting shook her head with a smile. She pushed the lever, released the foot brake, pressed the accelerator and turned the car onto the road. Little senior uncle seems to be a martial artist like an ascetic monk? Or maybe he doesn't have a strong desire for that. At the end of January, Xiaoshan Xing province. In the bright and clean new house, Qi Fang packed a pile of things. She patted her waist and said to her son, "This is for Zheka. Remember to take it with you later." Lu Qing looked at the sausages, bacon and glutinous rice cakes in the bag. The corner of his mouth twitched and said, "Mom, I'm afraid this won't pass the test." "Why not? You can set fire and explode but you can still pass the test, right? How can they be better than you?" Qi Fang glared at him and retorted loudly. "Mom, you make so much sense that I can't refute." Lu Qing laughed and sighed. It took him a Herculean effort to persuade the stubborn middle-aged woman. Before leaving, Qi Fang said earnestly, "You have to treat Zheka well. She's a young girl but she left her hometown for you. She can't even go home for Chinese New Year. She's all alone." On this matter, Lu Qing was suspected to be showing off his eloquence and embellishing the original story, so he didn't dare to say much. He nodded hurriedly and then changed the topic until he was chased out of the house by his impatient mother. Humming a melody silently, he happily got into the car and started to imagine his trip to America. Chinese New Year, my birthday, Valentine's Day and our date anniversary. I wonder what kind of gift or surprise Zheka will give me. Anyway, I'm already prepared. This time I can give Aunt Du a holiday and let her come back to spend Chinese New Year with her son. I'll be her full-time bodyguard. Hee, does this count as the school bell's bodyguard? When the weekend comes, if I have the chance, I'll try to challenge the mighty ones of the Jiruga sect. I'll slowly familiarize myself with what I've learned and warm up for the national competition in April. I'll ask Spider to keep an eye on the Holy Top Church. If that scumbag Pavel dares to come out and commit a crime, I'll make sure he'll never be able to do anything bad again. His good mood was met with a not-so-good flight delay. Lu Qing arrived in Connecticut 5 hours later than expected. It was already 10 at night. The cold wind was howling and the snow was falling. "Didn't I ask you to wait for me at home? I'm not a kid. I can find a car myself." Lu Qing replied to Yan Zheka on his phone as he walked out of the gate. "It's late and cold. You still have class tomorrow." Yan Zheka replied with an emoji of lowering its head and smiling shyly. "But I want to see my Qing first." Lu Qing was taken aback at first but soon broke into a smile. Stunned expression, "Wait, what did I see just now? My little fairy said something mushy to me. It's all because of you." Yan Zheka replied with grief and anger. After reading the message, Lu Qing didn't even have time to type when a white figure entered his eyes. The girl was wearing a long white down jacket and a light-colored knitted cap. Fluffy balls dangled from both sides of the cap to protect her ears. She was beautiful and cute. Their eyes met and looked at each other. Nothing needed to be said. In the office of the Department of Homeland Security, Smith thought he was finally free after not seeing a certain troublemaker for nearly 2 months. He started to learn Chinese with great interest. He stared blankly at the monitor screen and spat out 3 unfamiliar and strange syllables. Motherf *her. P.S. There are only 2 days left at the end of the month. Remember to vote or it'll be a waste if you don't. Chapter 524. Lu. As Smith often called him that, Lu Qing already had a reaction to it. However, when he looked in the direction of the voice, all he saw were 2 unfamiliar Caucasian students. Sensing his gaze, George and Wilton got even more agitated. They blurted out a series of words and slang. Not only were they as fast as a machine gun, but they also interfered with each other. Lu Qing, whose hearing was barely good enough, was confused. He could only vaguely make out the familiar words King of Youth League. However, the professional security guard who had put some distance between them, understood most of it. That Asian boy is in the top 4 of the King of Youth League. He's the idol of those 2 students. I wonder what competition it is. Looks like they're hardcore fans of Chinese culture. They're crazy about martial arts, which is more mysterious than martial arts. The security guard gave his evaluation and thought highly of Lu Qing. He took out his encrypted phone and started contacting the headquarters. As a professional bodyguard, when an unknown person with a certain level of strength appeared around his employer, he had to carefully investigate the background of the person, prepare a plan and guard against accidents. Participated in the King of Youth League. They call him Lu. He described Lu Qing's surname with a similar pronunciation. Please reply as soon as possible. After sending the message, he held his phone in his hand and waited for a reply. He looked at Lu Qing warily and observed his interaction with the students. Just then his phone buzzed and vibrated wildly. It almost broke free from its restraints and escaped. The senior security guard picked it up and looked at it, only to see one shocking blood-red word after another on the screen: very dangerous. Do not approach. Avoid him. Stay away from him. Oh my God. The senior security guard froze for a few seconds and subconsciously put some distance between them. When his brain finally understood the situation, he suppressed his fear and rushed into the classroom with his head down. He grabbed his employer and whispered, "Go, go, go, go." Regardless of whether the other party had any ill intentions, leaving first was definitely the right thing to do. Lu Qing didn't notice this little interlude. After xianxia's translation, he roughly understood that he had met two true fans. He returned their greetings with a smile. Wilton, the freckled, brown-haired youth, praised him excitedly. At the end of it, he nervously extended an invitation. "Are you free these days? Can you come visit our martial arts hobby club? It would be even better if you could tell us more about the mysteries of Chinese martial arts." George scolded his companion under his breath, feeling that he was too nervous to speak clearly, so he quickly added, "There's a martial arts club in Connecticut University and we're one of the members. Everyone is very interested in Chinese martial arts, and we hope to get a more detailed introduction from you." Holding xianxia's hand, Lu Qing heard the girl's eager reaction when she heard the words martial arts hobby club. He understood. Tilting his head, he chuckled and asked, "Do you want to stretch your limbs?" Ever since she came to the United States in August, other than her daily training and her occasional guidance, Ko had not enjoyed a battle for a long time. For a martial artist who liked to participate in such activities, this was not something to be happy about. With her husband by her side, she didn't need to think about anything else. Xianxia thought for a while and nodded reluctantly, with her eyes shining. "Then let's go take a look in the afternoon. There are no classes anyway." "All right." Lu Qing turned to George and Wilton and smiled warmly. "How about this afternoon? We'll be there around 2. "All right. No problem. No problem at all." The blond youth, George, almost slid to his knees in celebration. After getting the address, Lu Qing waved to the two foreign fans and walked out of the campus hand in hand with xianxia. As they walked, the girl suddenly stopped and blurted out in frustration, "I didn't bring my martial arts suit and shoes. How are you going to stretch your limbs?" "Ko, you don't look like you're reluctant at all." Lu Qing laughed inwardly and said calmly, "Why do you think I said we'll be there at 2? Isn't it just to give us time to drive home and get our things?" Xianxia turned her head in surprise and stared at Lu Qing with her eyes wide open for more than 10 seconds. Then she broke into a smile and gave him a thumbs up. 5-star rating. "I didn't even get it. What should I do? I feel like Qing has surpassed me in terms of intelligence." "Poo poo poo. No way. It must be because I'm sleepy." Thinking of this, she quickly changed the topic. "Then what are we having for lunch?" Before Xianxia could finish, she remembered something. She took out her phone, unlocked the screen, lowered her head and started typing. Lu Qing did the same. After a while, the girl waved her phone and suggested a little proudly, "Let's have this one. It's in a commercial building nearby. It's a seafood restaurant in Connecticut that has been operating for decades. This is a guide I made in my spare time from studying." Looking at the address, route and name of the restaurant on the girl's screen, Lu Qing suddenly laughed and raised his phone to show her the screen. The same picture and the same words. "What a coincidence. I made a guide too," he said with a smile. Xianxia focused her eyes and smiled like a flower. The tacit understanding grew, and the two of them swung their hands together, following the route given by the map. They slowly walked forward, glancing at each other from time to time, and then smiled as they turned their heads to look to the side. Around them, white snow pressed down on the branches and students walked back and forth. 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Martial Arts Hobby Club. At home, Xianxia had already tied her hair into a ponytail and changed into a full set of white martial arts suit with black edges. She looked both youthful and charming, and her face was so radiant that George, Wilton, and the other martial arts club members couldn't take their eyes off her. They couldn't believe that it was the usually old-fashioned and conservative Sophia. Although the two countries had different aesthetic standards, their cultures had influenced each other for many years. True beauty was still recognized. Sophia's features were exquisite, but her figure was too average. George and Wilton looked at each other and shook their heads. They were loyal fans of big breasts and big buttocks. They found Susan very sexy. In comparison, Xianxia was an angel who could be appreciated with a calm mind. After chatting for a while, Lu Qing, who knew what his wife was thinking, suggested actual combat training. Her? George pointed at the slender Xianxia and blurted out in shock. Is there a problem? Xianxia knew that she was being discriminated against and felt a little annoyed. Thinking of Ren, who looked like a cartoon character and a doll, George quickly shook his head. No problem. Lu Qing laughed and raised his right hand to announce the start of the match. George gathered his thoughts and got into a boxing stance. He took a few tentative steps and threw a punch. Xianxia shook her shoulder and turned her arm into a spear. With a snap, she stabbed at her opponent's throat, forcing him to raise his fist and shrink his head to defend himself. With her joints springing and fascia stretching, the girl took advantage of the opportunity to launch 24 blizzard strikes. After 3 punches in a row, she suddenly swung her waist, tightened her trousers and gave a low kick. George, who was already a little flustered, was suddenly kicked. He raised his right leg to block and swung back and his body fell forward. Next. Lu Qing reached out to support George and let Wilton take over. This Caucasian student's skills were probably only of amateur third pin, but his body condition was good and his arm strength was sufficient. Overall, he was probably of amateur first pin. It was a pity that he couldn't make full use of his strength. Wilton was slightly weaker than George, but Xianxia, who hadn't used her skills for a long time, let go of one opportunity after another to prolong the match. However, the result was not in doubt. Wilton was hit by her sliding punch that contained meteor force and almost vomited on the spot. The Caucasian girl Colleen was next. Xianxia changed her style and applied what little she learned from watching Lu Cheng's battle videos into the match. After defeating 5 students in a row, her physical strength was obviously depleted. Her spirit was even worse. A thin layer of sweat appeared on her forehead. She chose to stop and rest. Lu Qing helped her wipe her sweat with a towel and asked George and Wilton casually, "You're from Jiruga sect, right?" "We used to be," Wilton answered bitterly. George explained in the same tone, "We left because we couldn't become combat apprentices for a few years." "What's the problem?" Lu Qing asked curiously. "We couldn't awaken our own spirit." George sighed and looked at Lu Qing expectantly. "Lu, do you think there's hope for us to learn Chinese martial arts? If we can't awaken our own spirit, then it's more difficult to practice still stance. Of course, different martial arts systems focus on different aspects. It's not impossible for them to enter meditation." Lu Qing thought for a moment and said, "Calming the mind and focusing on the mind are the prerequisites of most martial arts and combat sections. However, everyone's methods are different. Jiruga combines self-hypnosis, Mission Sect leaves their worries to God, and our country's martial arts emphasizes daily practice to get rid of distracting thoughts and seek for peace of mind. If you can't do this, you can only place your hopes on modern scientific research or cult-like martial arts. When we practice Jiruga, we can become very quiet, but we can't feel our own spirit," Wilton answered bitterly. "Is it because our awareness is too strong and we instinctively resist self-hypnosis?" Lu Qing saw that more and more martial arts club members had gathered around. He pondered for a moment and said, "Then I'll do a few moves and you guys can feel it." After that, he took off his jacket and let Xianxia hold it. He got into a stance and slowly punched and pulled back his arm. There was nothing special about his moves, and they were so slow that they were useless in actual combat. George, Colleen and the rest watched blankly, not knowing what was going on. Gradually, they felt that Lu Cheng's movements were like the gentle surface of a lake or the unfolding of clouds. They couldn't help but become quiet, unwilling to disturb the natural harmony or disturb the peace in their hearts. Away from the hustle and bustle of the city at this moment, they seemed to see the deep blue sea and the sparkling waves under the moonlight. When Lu Cheng stopped his slow punches and kicks, the surroundings were as silent as a church that had just finished praying. "There's hope for those who were quiet just now." He smiled, took his jacket from Xianxia and put it on. He whispered, "Do you want to fight a few more rounds or do you want to shower and go home?" "I'll shower at home. I forgot to bring shampoo and facial cleanser." The girl bit her lip and replied. She felt that her IQ was at its lowest today. Lu Qing laughed, pulled the girl over, waved to George and the rest, and walked slowly towards the entrance of the martial arts club. It was only then that George and the rest woke up from their daze, as though they had just heard a symphony that cleansed their hearts. Lu Qing and Xianxia's figures had already disappeared at the entrance, leaving behind some whispers in Chinese. "Is this the result of your understanding of enemy heart-freezing move? Yeah, Kochien has a good eye." At the same time, a security company sent out a warning to its partners. China Wuxia Club Lu Cheng has appeared in Connecticut. Extremely dangerous. Lu. In the Msasi Martial Arts Club, a black-haired, brown-eyed young man saw the news. His lips curled into a smile, and his eyes shone like the stars in the sky. P.S. Looking for monthly votes on the last day. Oh right, something might happen in the afternoon, but it hasn't been decided yet. If I don't update at 7 then it will be at 11. Chapter 525. After leaving the martial arts hobby club, Lu Cheng and Xianxia went straight home. They planned to go to the supermarket this weekend to stock up on ingredients for next Monday's New Year and birthday celebration. After showering, drying her hair and changing into a fresh set of home clothes, Xianxia stood in front of the bed. She spread her arms and leaned back, falling into the blanket comfortably. Then she said coquettishly, "Cheng Cheng, I'm going to sleep first. Come and massage me until I fall asleep." Okay. Lu Cheng smiled and leaned over. Controlling his body, he used the most suitable strength to release the tremor force to relieve the tension and deep tiredness in her muscles. She closed her eyes in satisfaction. A little higher, a little higher. Yes, right here. So sore. It's so sore. My poor old waist. Xianxia guided her personal masseur. Before she finished her words, she suddenly felt Lu Cheng's movements stop. She let out 2 muffled laughs. The girl was at a loss at first. Then she came to her senses and buried her face in the pillow. She hit the side and said fiercely, "It's all your fault." Lu Cheng apologized seriously. His technique became more and more exquisite. It didn't take long for Xianxia's whole body to relax. Her tiredness was relieved and she began to feel sleepy. After massaging for a while, he saw that the girl's breathing had stabilized and she had fallen asleep. Lu Cheng retracted his hands and lay on the side. He planned to play with his phone for a while before going to the lawn outside to do some more training. Just as he got into position, Xianxia rolled over as if she had an automatic radar. She wrapped her arms around her chest and raised her right leg slightly above her knee. In the blink of an eye, Lu Cheng was tied up. The culprit didn't move at all. She was sleeping soundly. Who is sleeping so soundly? Lu Cheng looked at the girl's quiet and beautiful face with a smile. Looking at her, he suddenly felt a little sleepy. Sleeping so soundly. This kind of life is so relaxing, relaxing, relaxing. Lu Cheng didn't resist the call. He hugged Xianxia, closed his eyes and fell asleep. Lu Cheng didn't know how long he had slept. When he woke up, it was already dark outside. It was quiet everywhere. Only a faint light shone through the curtainless window, casting a faint glow on the room. What time is it? Xianxia opened her eyes in a daze and asked casually. Lu Cheng smiled lazily and said, "It's just getting dark, about 6 o'clock. Yes. Xianxia changed her position and lay side by side with Lu Cheng. She said lazily, "I'm a little hungry, mine is already protesting." Lu Cheng tilted his head and looked at the girl's small and delicate ears. "Let's not make any troublesome dishes later. We'll defrost the meat, cut it into pieces and roast it. We have several kinds of dipping sauces from Xiaoshan, Songqing, Dongying and Gaoli at home. You can choose whatever you want." Xianxia planned generously. "Then we'll wash some vegetable leaves." As she spoke, she suddenly bit her lower lip and said in an aggrieved manner, "But what if I don't want to move? I just want to lie down like this." What a coincidence. Me too. Lu Cheng felt that he was both captured by his little fairy and the quilt. "Do you want to starve your wife to death?" Xianxia snorted. I'll get up. I'll get up right away." Lu Cheng struggled to turn around and leave the quilt, only to find that the girl also sat up. Seeing his surprised and confused expression, Xianxia raised her chin and looked to the side. "I have to supervise you." Although she said she was supervising, she dominated the whole process. Not only did she busy herself, but she also gave orders. When the electricity was plugged in and the meat in the roast pot was sizzling, the process finally came to an end. The surroundings were peaceful, the lights were warm and the aroma of the meat filled the air. Lu Cheng and Xianxia looked at each other, smiled and raised their glasses. It was impossible to be touched so often in life. This was enough. Don't overcook the meat. The fat parts of the beef are easy to crumble and the texture will harden. The girl recalled her past experience and dug out her experience of roasting meat, trying to make herself seem omnipotent. "I'm Coach Yan." Halfway through the meal, Lu Cheng suddenly stopped and turned to look at the door. "What's wrong?" Xianxia asked blankly. "Someone is approaching." Lu Cheng stood up and walked to the door. He looked relaxed and didn't feel any danger. After 10 or 20 seconds, the doorbell rang. He counted to 3 and opened the door. A middle-aged man in a black tuxedo with a bow tie of the same color stood outside. His shirt was neat and tidy. He had an eye-catching mustache and spoke with a strong accent. "Hello, are you Mr. Lu Qing?" "Yes." Lu Qing looked at him, puzzled. The middle-aged man handed over an invitation with both hands and replied with a smile, "My master would like to invite Mr. Lu to a banquet this weekend. If possible, he hopes that you can have a friendly duel with him. This will not be made public. Only the guests of the banquet can watch." "A challenge is coming?" Lu Qing thought. He took the invitation and opened it. He saw the logo of a fist holding a trident in the Msasi martial arts arena, the location of the banquet, the exact time, and the name of the signatory. "Brandon?" Lu Qing read out the name and knew who it was. He looked up at the middle-aged man and nodded politely. "I'll be there on time." "Thank you." The middle-aged man placed his right hand on his chest and bowed. After sending him off, Lu Qing closed the door and met Coach Yan's scrutinizing gaze. "What's the matter?" Xianxia could only vaguely hear the words banquet and duel. "Brandon from the Jiruga sect wants to challenge me at a banquet of high standards." Lu Qing smiled casually. Brandon was the most popular grandmaster of martial arts in the Msasi martial arts arena in recent years. He was only 22 years old and had already become a senior, which was equivalent to an inhuman. He had just turned 24 this year and was one of the top rising stars in the entire United States. His father, Adrian, was also a veteran martial artist. He was the middle-aged Caucasian man wielding a big sword that Lu Qing saw when he first arrived at the Msasi martial arts arena. Two veterans in one family had established the Jackson family's position in Connecticut. "When?" Xianxia's eyes sparkled as she asked with great interest. For such a formal challenge, safety was guaranteed. Moreover, both parties were at the inhuman stage and had strong control. Therefore, she wasn't worried. "Tomorrow night." Lu Qing acted like an American movie. He bent down and extended his hand. "Miss, would you like to go with me?" "My pleasure." Xianxia smiled sweetly and extended her hand. The next day at 7 in the evening, the couple arrived at the Riverside Manor in Songqing University's martial arts suit as a couple's outfit. Under the guidance of the servant, they entered the banquet hall. Lu Qing's nose itched with the smell of perfume, making him want to sneeze. He and Xianxia weren't dressed impolitely because the host of the banquet was also in a martial arts suit. Brandon stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding a glass of golden champagne. He raised his glass at Lu Qing and Xianxia with a smile. He had black hair and brown eyes. He was tall and muscular and his skin was close to bronze. He was full of power and pressure. Taking a sip of the champagne, Brandon laughed from afar. "Are you going to give us an opening dance or an ending dance?" As he spoke, he pointed at the open-air martial arts arena outside to prevent Lu Qing from misunderstanding. The place was brightly lit as though it was daytime. Huge Roman-style stone pillars stood there. "I don't have a problem with either." Lu Qing replied with a smile. "Then let's do it now. I can't wait." Brandon smiled apologetically. The conversation between the two of them attracted the attention of the guests. Numerous gazes were cast on them, and they were all overflowing with interest. Lu Qing looked around and asked in a low voice, "Where's the referee?" "Referee?" Brandon shrugged his shoulders. "I hate referees. A formal challenge requires a referee. Otherwise, I'd rather not accept it." Lu Qing expressed his opinion firmly. Brandon immediately showed an amused expression. "As an outstanding martial artist, how can you rely on the protection of the referee? Don't tell me that you're scared and cowardly now that you're away from the referee? Have you forgotten that fighting is an art used on the battlefield? Have you forgotten the boiling blood and the courage of a man? Only those who are used to fighting without any protection are real men and real warriors. If you admit that you're a boy crying in his mother's arms and a shameful coward, then you can leave." Xianxia was infuriated by his words. Her body trembled slightly. "Let's go." Lu Qing pulled her, turned around calmly and walked towards the door. "If I hadn't experienced those few life-and-death battles, I would definitely be enraged. However, the more I experience the feeling of walking on the edge of death, the less I want to take the initiative to try it. I'm not afraid, but that doesn't mean I like it. Since I started practicing martial arts, all the battles without a referee were either because I had absolute confidence or because I was forced into it. How can I take the initiative to jump into a dangerous situation? This is completely against my martial arts will. I'm not protecting my reputation." Xianxia followed him blankly. She suddenly calmed down under the surprised gazes of the guests. She held Lu Qing's hand tighter. She felt that he was more courageous than accepting the challenge. "All right. At this moment, Brandon clapped his hands and said with a sigh, "I can only force myself. Mr. Poke, please be the referee for today's battle." Lu Qing stopped in his tracks and turned around. He calmly met the gazes of those who were looking at him as if he was a coward. P.S. Don't waste the remaining monthly votes. Also, ask for a guaranteed monthly vote for July. You can vote after midnight. Chapter 526. The Jackson family held an important position in the entire Jiruga. There was no lack of experts attending their banquet. Even if Brandon didn't invite his father Adrian to be the referee to avoid suspicion, there were still other suitable candidates. Poke, who was not a member of the Msasi, came from another sect within the Jiruga martial arts society that emphasized fist and kick. He was a veteran grandmaster of martial arts for more than 20 years. He had a light yellow beard that was almost white, and his eyes were dark blue. When he raised his head, there were no wrinkles. He sized up Lu Qing, who had turned around and slowly finished the champagne in his hand. He placed the glass on the waiter's tray and replied with a deep voice, "All right." He didn't say much, nor did he make any sarcastic remarks. He instantly turned into a neutral referee, exited from the side door, and walked to the center of the Roman stone pillars. "Please." Brandon bowed with a smile and made a gentlemanly invitation to Lu Qing. Lu Qing passed his phone to Xianxia and returned the gesture with a composed expression. He calmly followed the referee and entered the open-air arena. Brandon paused for a moment and suddenly moved his arms. His muscles, fascias and joints emitted sounds of strength. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him trembled slightly and shook continuously. Good. One by one the guests gave him a thumbs up. After the warm-up was over, Brandon walked out of the banquet hall with his heavy body and nimble footsteps like a human bear. He stood in front of Lu Qing and got into a boxing stance. The towering ancient stone pillars around them cut off the field of vision, making the venue desolate and spacious. The smile on Brandon's face gradually disappeared. His eyes seemed to be burning with a star-like radiance, brimming with a strong desire for battle. He locked his opponent's figure in the center of his pupils. When he said he didn't want a referee, it was his honest opinion and also a psychological tactic. If his opponent couldn't stand the sarcasm and chose to fight as a man, he would enter the environment he was most familiar with. His opponent would definitely be fearful of any unexpected accidents. If he was afraid of danger and insisted on not agreeing to a retro gladiator fight, he would feel dejected even with a referee. He would feel that he had lost a round before the match had even begun. It would be hard for him to show any courage or guts in front of him. Although Lu Qing's reaction of leaving without hesitation was a little unexpected, it was still considered normal and didn't affect him. At this moment, Poke raised his right hand and thoughtfully reminded him, "Get ready." Immediately after, he waved his hand fiercely. His voice passed through the windows and into the hall, "Begin." Just as the referee finished his sentence, Lu Qing suddenly saw a blinding light erupting from the surface of Brandon's body. The light blinded his vision and he couldn't see anything clearly anymore. Awakening one's self-spirit was the starting point of the true inheritance of the Jiruga sect. It was also the key to becoming a combat apprentice. From this point onwards, the practitioner would follow a special training method to strengthen one's self-spirit step by step. It would complement and strengthen one's self-spirit with the strengthening of one's physical body, until the mutation of one's cells and genes occurred, giving rise to special, inhuman abilities. The Jiruga sect named these abilities differently from the mainstream. Some were called sea, some were called stars, and so on. What Adrian and Brandon had awakened were stars. They had the function of heaviness and the mysteries of light. At this moment, Brandon displayed the results of his cultivation in the past year without holding back. Star, radiant light. Lu Qing's vision was blinded by white. All he could hear was the sound of his enemy breaking through the air barrier at high speed. Other than that, everything else was covered up. It was as though Lu Qing had completely lost track of his enemy. Brandon appeared diagonally in front of Lu Qing in a flash. Exerting strength in his legs, he turned his back halfway and swung his right arm out. Covered in specks of light, he executed a perfect right hook from the bottom to the top, aiming straight for his opponent's chin. With the heaviness of Star and his own strength, he was confident that he could forcefully break through any of his opponent's barriers other than Dan's stage explosion. Moreover, the Jiruga sect's explosion was based on one's self-spirit. There was no need for the so-called qi and blood concentration, like the Chinese martial artists. Although it would result in the loss of the terrifying ability to unify one's force and absolute reaction, it would increase one's speed by a notch. Not only that, but it would also give one a stronger sense of danger. Each had its own advantages and disadvantages. Brandon's current plan was to use the initiative to his advantage and completely suppress his opponent, not giving him the chance to control the rhythm and avoid his weaknesses. Bam! Brandon's fist pierced through the air, causing goosebumps to form on Lu Cheng's chin. However, in a situation where he couldn't see or hear, he quickly raised his right arm and threw a sideways punch, accurately landing on the side of Brandon's uppercut. With a light strike, he deflected his opponent's thick arm, causing it to miss its target. Brandon had anticipated this. He immediately put his left fist into position and combined them. While Lu Cheng's sight and hearing had yet to recover, he launched a series of attacks. Crisp sounds rang out continuously. Not only did his combat techniques carry traces of Msasi, but he also seemed to incorporate the characteristics of Miluo, Nanjing, and other countries. His knee strikes and low kicks were at the peak of perfection, effectively making up for the gaps in his punches. Bam! 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 Brandon's punches alternated between hooks and swings. Sometimes they were straight and sometimes they were pointed. Sparks of light scattered, illuminating the crystals on Lu Cheng's hands, arms, and legs. During this process, he slightly stimulated his own spirit, causing his muscles and tendons to tremble. He completed a low-intensity outburst. His punches were heavy and his strength surged. His attacks were tightly connected, and his rhythm was extremely fast. Lu Cheng couldn't find an opportunity to use force concentration. He could only use ice spirit to block and take a step back. In order not to associate him with the Deliver Man, and to effectively familiarize himself with his gains from last year, he planned to use Emperor Yen force sparingly in official events in America. He planned to use it as a surprise attack at a critical moment. Bam! 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 Lu Cheng swung his arm and threw a punch. His Zen undersea tremor and his leg bent low kick. He blocked 3 consecutive attacks and took 3 consecutive steps back. Every step left a clear crack on the stone floor. The guests watching the battle through the floor-to-ceiling windows relaxed as they sipped on their champagne. Xianxia held a glass of plain water. There wasn't any worry on her face. She and Lu Cheng had discussed the current situation many times last night and during the day. As expected, after taking 2 more steps back and almost crashing into a Roman stone pillar, Lu Cheng suddenly advanced instead of retreating. He jumped half a step and threw a quick punch at his opponent's lower abdomen. Brandon's fist was shrouded in starlight. It looked like he was wearing a practice glove. He swung his arm and blocked his opponent's attack with a bang. Boom! The sound of rolling thunder reverberated in all directions. Both of them, who seemed to have frozen momentarily from the collision of their fists, shook at the same time. Their radiance turned white and turned into frost that splashed outwards. They were evenly matched. Lu Cheng had turned the tables by using 24 blizzard strikes consecutively. Even without using force concentration, he was able to block his opponent's low-intensity outburst attack. Seeing this, Brandon, whose body was starting to stiffen from the cold, immediately changed. He stimulated his own spirit, connecting his muscles and blood, and propping up his skin and tendons. His body suddenly enlarged. He raised his thicker right arm high and turned it into a terrifying giant sword. Mixed with heavy starlight, he chopped down at Lu Cheng's head. The ferocity of the attack seemed to be able to cut through everything. Adrian was a veteran grandmaster of martial arts who was famous for using great swords. As his son, although Brandon disdained to rely on weapons, he had integrated swordsmanship and the corresponding use of stars into his punches and kicks. It had become his favorite way of attacking when he was in a frenzy. Before the great sword arrived, Lu Cheng's hair stood on end. Without hesitation, he circulated his qi and blood, stimulating the corresponding parts of his body. His muscles bulged and his tendons protruded. Simplified fighting formula. The instant expansion stirred up the airflow in the surroundings. Together with the punch flew up into the sky and slammed into Brandon's arm. Boom! Transparent ripples spread rapidly. Cracks spread under Lu Cheng's feet. Brandon's arm, which had transformed into a sword, rebounded, causing his body to swing backwards. His qi and blood circulated again. Stimulated again, Lu Cheng took half a step forward expressionlessly. He clenched his fist and punched straight at his chest. The intertwining greenish-black muscles were filled with explosive power. So fast? Brandon was shocked. He didn't care that the frenzy wasn't over yet. He raised his left arm and swung the greatsword horizontally. It looked ordinary, but it was filled with accumulated strength. Bam! Flesh and blood collided. There was a dent and the bones were slightly deformed. However, they immediately reverted to their original form. Brandon held his breath as he felt the majestic and terrifying impact. He was experienced. With a twist of his waist, he shot backwards like lightning and crashed into a Roman pillar. Stone chips flew everywhere and the thick pillars swayed. It almost fell or broke. Lu Qing wouldn't let this opportunity go. He outlined the attainment formula and once again used his qi and blood to stimulate his body, cutting down on the intermediate steps. With just a step, he closed in on his enemy. At this moment, Brandon's face lit up with excitement. The surface of his body shone again, suppressing the surrounding streetlights and illuminating the entire open-air arena. In the abnormal brilliance, silhouettes appeared one after another. They all looked like Brandon. They pounced on Lu Qing from all directions, forcing him to react with absolute reaction. Jianghu Star's technique, illusory light. The Roman pillars in the arena weren't there to look good or to show taste. Their position effectively affected reflection and refraction, making the illusory light stronger and closer to reality. To Brandon, the other 7 silhouettes were formed by light energy. They could also cause damage. They weren't fake. P.S. Since everyone doesn't like the old rules, I'll update first. Also, I'd like to thank everyone. Although the June update didn't decrease, it was still unstable. Martial arts actually made it into the top 10 monthly votes for the first time, ranking 9th. With the increasing number of books in circulation, it wasn't easy at all. Also, please guarantee the monthly votes. Chapter 527. In the brightly lit arena, a total of 7 identical figures pounced at Lu Qing. All of them stirred up a gust of wind, creating a stimulus that was hard to distinguish. Of course, it was easy to tell because the Roman pillar that Brandon had crashed into was still shaking slightly. The corresponding figure was clear and distinct. However, Lu Qing took a step to the side, lowered his shoulders and leaned to the side. Following that, he swung his right arm and threw a punch like a bullet towards the empty space. Bam! The sound of the collision shook the floor-to-ceiling windows in the hall. Suddenly, starlight-covered skin, bulging muscles, and strong knuckles appeared in front of Lu Qing's frosty right fist. At some point in time, Brandon had bizarrely changed his position, leaving behind an illusion beside the Roman pillar where he was previously standing. There were a total of 7 figures, all of which were illusions. His real body had long gone into hiding. He wanted to take advantage of the chaos to launch a surprise attack and deal a fatal blow to his opponent. For most of the inhuman experts, it was indeed a threat. If Lu Qing's ice mirror hadn't made the breakthrough and was still at the same level as before, he would have been caught in a fluster. One moment of carelessness and he would have been caught in the crossfire. But right now his consciousness was high up in the sky as a god 3 feet above his head. Using the ice mirror to reflect his surroundings, he keenly sensed the anomaly and made the first move, interrupting Brandon's ambush. Poof, poof, poof. At the same time, the 7 Brandon figures formed by light energy pounced on Lu Qing, triggering waves of blinding brilliance and flowing starlight. As Lu Qing took a step forward and struck diagonally, a thick layer of ice crystals had formed on the surface of his body. They were translucent, solid, and extraordinary. Under the burning and melting of the light, they either sizzled into water or vaporized instantly, forcefully resisting this round of attacks. If it wasn't for the improvement of his ice armor, he definitely wouldn't have chosen such a response. Moreover, the 7 figures came from different directions. Without the stacking of corrosion, he could naturally deal with them calmly, as immovable as a mountain. Amidst the explosion, as the 7 figures disappeared, Brandon's silhouette was quickly outlined. His left hand bounced back, swinging involuntarily as he felt an unbearable pain. His punch was interrupted and he was almost injured. The pain stimulated Brandon's soul, causing him to have a strong desire for violence. He was like a soldier whose eyes were bloodshot. When Brandon noticed that Lu Qing had weakened from the head-on clash just now, he flexed his back muscles without hesitation and delivered a heavy straight punch. Under the cover of such a ferocious attack, he stepped forward with his left foot and tripped Lu Qing's legs, acting as both a fulcrum and a rope. This was the jutsu of the Jianghu sect. Brandon wanted to turn the battle into a ground fight. He would rely on the skillful coordination of his constellation ability to unleash various techniques to break the enemy's so-called listening skill and completely subdue him. When he kicked, Lu Qing took a step back. From the perspective of the guests in the hall, the two of them seemed to be performing a dance with tacit understanding. Brandon's kick missed, and his straight punch failed. He immediately turned sideways, lowered his back and extended his right palm. He was going to use his well-practiced technique to throw his opponent to the ground. Lu Qing took another step back. It was as if he had known the enemy's plan in advance, so that his fall would fail awkwardly. Lu Qing shook his right shoulder and swung out his arm, tightening it from its softness. Then, like a whip, he struck towards the side of Brandon's neck. Brandon raised his arm, which glowed brilliantly, and assumed a defensive boxing stance. He tilted his head to the side, guarding against the second and third part of the enemy's attack. When he watched the video of the battle, the memory was still fresh in his mind. He still had a lingering fear. Bam! Brandon's arm swayed a little as he lashed out with the whip. It was as though countless dust particles were flying into the air. As expected, Lu Qing snapped his knuckles, aimed at the side of his face and spread his fingers. Even though he was far away, he could imagine the enhancement Aurora would provide. With a whoosh, the tip of Lu Cheng's fingers shot out streaks of crystal-clear cold light. They left his body like sharp arrows and headed straight for the enemy's temples and eyes. They were faster, more solid, and more ferocious than Aurora. They were like ice spirits. Brandon had guessed the beginning, but he didn't expect the ending. When he saw the sudden change, he was scared out of his wits. Cold sweat broke out on his back and he felt as if electricity had passed through his pores. He instinctively shrunk his head and curled up his body. He felt the sound of the arrow elongating in his ears. The bone-piercing cold flew past his scalp and into the surface of an ancient Roman-style stone pillar. Lu Qing pulled back his chi and blood calmly and unleashed his Dan force. He turned, lifted his hips, tightened his trousers and lashed out with his leg. Like a steel whip, he lashed out at the enemy who was facing him from the side. Brandon quickly stimulated his self-spirit. He quickly swung his arm, clenched his fist and hammered down. He narrowly missed the whip kick. Amidst the loud bang, invisible waves rippled outwards. Brandon, who was built like a human bear, nimbly moved his waist and back muscles. Despite being at a disadvantage, he used the force to leap away, instantly widening the distance between them to more than 10 meters. Lu Qing concealed his attainment formula and followed up with a step. He retracted his chi and blood again and unleashed his force again. He wore a crystal-clear frost glove on his left fist, swinging it sideways. It was unusually heavy. Bam! After Brandon blocked the attack, he swung his right fist again. He used the same force concentration and ice spirit to hurt his opponent. Bam! 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 Lu Qing completed one explosion after another rhythmically. He swung his arms, swung his legs and struck with his knees. Every attack was heavy and filled with coldness. Bam! 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 Faced with his opponent's precise footwork and attacks, Brandon was forced to use high-intensity explosive attacks to defend himself. He lost his advantage of being faster. After blocking more than a dozen attacks, he finally retreated. Every step he took created a cloud of dust, splinters, sand, and pebbles. It was like the battle scenes of the demigods recorded in many ancient books. Throughout this process, Brandon felt himself getting colder and colder. His gushing blood and beating heart couldn't completely alleviate this feeling. His body gradually stiffened and became more and more sluggish. Compared to the violent and ferocious Emperor Yen force, the ice spirit force had the advantage of erosion and lasting effect. Bam! Lu Cheng's fist turned into a hammer and smashed downwards, hitting Brandon's raised fist. The impact made him stagger backwards. His hair was wet, and the droplets of sweat turned into white frost when they fell to the ground. Unwilling to wait for his death, Brandon roared. He couldn't care less about anything else. He stimulated his self-spirit and gathered the light energy in his body in an attempt to buy himself a chance to take a breather and find a way to turn the tables around. While he stimulated himself, Lu Qing seemed to have sensed it. He held his chi and blood in time. However, he didn't activate his Dan force immediately as usual. Instead, after a few moments of equilibrium, he seemed to have lost his temperature and blood, turning into an ice-cold corpse. The heaviness in his lower abdomen was still shrinking and moving away. This gave Brandon a chance to build up his strength. A smile of anticipation appeared on his face. He raised his left hand to protect his head and chest. Swinging his right fist, he struck out quickly and heavily. All the star brilliance gathered at a single point in front of him. Restriction of stars, light energy focus. Bam! At this moment, Lu Cheng's Dan force erupted uncontrollably. He was filled with blood again and regained his body temperature. He pulled his right arm and punched his chest, hitting the condensed star brilliance and glowing skin. Boom! Light exploded, illuminating the floor-to-ceiling windows in the hall. Xianxia bit her lips lightly, waiting for the figure to appear. The other guests forgot to drink, holding their glasses and watching intently. The exaggerated light disappeared in a flash, as though it was buried and devoured by something. Lu Cheng's figure appeared first, far away from his previous position. His right sleeve was in tatters like an exploded bamboo. His skin was slightly charred and shrouded in white mist. Seeing his sorry appearance, the guests were about to applaud, but they soon noticed that Brandon was standing there in a daze. He was still protecting his face with his left fist and punching with his right fist. From his fingertips to his hair, he was covered in a layer of glittering crystals, as if he had been frozen. Water droplets dripped down rapidly, and the layer of ice melted rapidly. Lu Qing circulated his qi and blood to stimulate his body parts. With a push of his feet, he pounced in front of Brandon again. Then he stretched his back, swung his arm and smashed his fist down. Bam! The air barrier exploded. Brandon, who had just been freed from the ice, threw out a punch slowly in an attempt to defend himself. However, he was sent flying backwards, breaking a Roman pillar with a loud bang. Lu Qing slid forward again. Without any change in expression, he threw out his left fist and smashed it on his opponent's forehead. He didn't hold back. If he was hit like that, even a man made of iron would have his head blown off. Pain came from his back and his limbs were sluggish. Brandon felt a stab in between his eyebrows. All he could see was Lu Qing's fist, which was getting bigger and bigger, filling up his entire vision. At that moment he clearly felt the taste of death. He couldn't help but tremble. He wanted to retreat, but he couldn't do so. Just as he was at his most desperate, a hand reached over. It glowed with a blue luster and held Lu Qing's fist firmly. The referee, Poke, had made his move, announcing the result of the match. Brandon lost. Lu Qing won. Lu Qing retracted his fist, saluted, and walked towards the side door with a smile. He walked towards xianxia, who was walking towards him. Phew. Brandon was still sitting on the pile of broken rocks, enjoying the beauty of being alive. He wasn't an idiot. He understood that Lu Qing's not holding back at the end was a small proof. After entering the banquet hall, Lu Qing and xianxia exchanged glances. They whispered in unison, "Let's go." Wouldn't it be asking for a snub to stay at Brandon's banquet after winning? In ancient times, that would be asking for a beating. When the words entered their ears, the couple couldn't help but laugh. They walked towards the door hand in hand. No one tried to stop them. The room was silent. Outside the door, the night sky was dark. The evening breeze blew gently. Lu Qing and xianxia walked further and further towards the car park. Only their soft Chinese voice could be heard. "You waited until the light energy focused before you tried that move of yours. Was it to better experience the characteristics of the Jiruga sect?" "Yeah. I keep feeling that this style is a little familiar. Maybe I was infected by the priest. P.S. I'm done with my work. Begging for monthly votes." Chapter 528. The river was illuminated by the starlight, and the coldness was bone-chilling. The Connecticut city at the end of January had a different kind of beauty. After xianxia drove out of Brandon's manor, she slowed down the car and wandered in the peaceful night, creating a feeling of leisure and relaxation. "There aren't many cars here. Let me teach you how to drive. It's an automatic transmission, super easy to learn," she suggested with great interest. "Sure," Lu Qing answered without hesitation. He unbuckled his seat belt and walked to the other door. With his control of his body, coordination of his limbs, and reflexes, it shouldn't be hard for him to learn how to drive, right? He waited for the girl to get into the passenger seat before he got into the driver's seat, fastened his seat belt and closed the door. "Don't you feel awkward?" xianxia turned her head and asked with a smile. "A little," Lu Qing answered honestly. "So awkward. We're of different heights and body types. The most suitable seat height and distance are definitely different too. Lu Qing, what's the difference between you wearing my t-shirt like this?" xianxia pointed out the problem with her bright eyes and taught Lu Qing how to adjust his seat and rearview mirror. After that, she excitedly introduced the application of brakes, accelerator, steering wheel, lights, gearbox lever, handbrake, and so on. The automatic transmission was relatively easy. Lu Qing was on the road in no time. He maintained a stable speed and cautiously operated ice mirror to eliminate his nervousness and anxiety. xianxia, who had tasted the taste of being a coach again, was satisfied. She praised herself a little and casually picked up her phone to surf the web. "Hey, there's another deliver man in the Big Apple," she exclaimed softly and said cheerfully. "How many imitators are there?" Lu Qing asked, amused. His eyes were still looking straight ahead. This superhero culture in the United States of America really spread everywhere and had a far-reaching impact. 1, 2, 6, 7. xianxia rolled her eyes and counted with her fingers. "About 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Before Lu Qing could point out that it was no different from not saying anything, she cleverly changed the topic. "This is good news for you." "Yeah." Lu Qing nodded casually. Otherwise, most superheroes would have been exposed long ago. In the past few months, there had been people imitating the Deliver Man in Big Apple, Luo City, and other places to punish criminals. Some of them were crudely seen through, while others imitated the Deliver Man perfectly. In terms of style and capability, the Deliver Man was believed to be the work of the Deliver Man again. It was said that a bureau of the Federation had combined the two cases and expanded the scope of the investigation. It was suspected that the Deliver Man was not in Connecticut before and after the two incidents in Connecticut. For a veteran Grandmaster of Combat, this was entirely possible, and there were precedents in the past. Truth and falsehood were the active soil of American superheroes. Different countries had different situations. Using one's own country to trick another country would often lead to a huge mistake. Smith had foreseen this and analyzed it in detail for himself. Whether it was in the United States or Hua Nation, the most difficult case to solve was the same. That was, someone came to a foreign land on a whim and casually killed a passerby who had nothing to do with them. Moreover, there were no clues such as fingerprints, DNA, and surveillance cameras left behind. Then, the investigators could only rely on their luck to find a needle in a haystack. The police should not be underestimated, nor should they be worshipped. Unsolved cases related to American superheroes were too numerous to mention. The clown reappears in Big Apple, another tragic murder case. Xianxia read the news headline and sighed. Compared to that place, Connecticut's security is worth 5 stars. Although there were gangs and dangerous criminals here, they were relatively few in number. Also, none of them had antisocial personalities and would not provoke the government. It can't be helped. After all, it's the most prosperous city in America. Physical invulnerability experts and inhuman experts like to gather there. Once the number of experts increases, it's normal to have a few scumbags and perverts. Haven't there been experts who took revenge on society in places like Beijing, Huahai, Huaqing, and Moshang? Haven't there been vicious cases with huge impact that went unsolved? Don't we, the Ice God sect and Xuanhuan study, occasionally hand over disciples to the judicial authorities? Lu Qing comforted his wife. As the financial center of America, Connecticut was a big city with a high ranking. It had the super sect Jiruga, a cult that could go against it, and a government that maintained stability. There were close to 10 physical invulnerability experts, not to mention the number of inhumans. So far, only 2 dangerous criminals had appeared, which showed that the security was good. Of course, it was only limited to certain areas. Similarly, places like Beijing, Huahai, and Moshang were also places where experts gathered. It was just that the control was stricter, so there weren't many vicious cases. To the residents of Connecticut or the Big Apple, supercriminals weren't the biggest threat. In modern society, once exposed, they would definitely be arrested and dealt with. Such perverted murderers wouldn't dare to commit crimes openly. They would either be like Mizuki, who relied on seduction and gradual corruption, or like the butcher, who chose places with insufficient surveillance resources. As long as they didn't go to places they weren't supposed to and could resist the temptation, the danger level was actually very low. Of course, after Lu Cheng's cleanup, it was close to zero. To the average person, the biggest threat was terrorists, people who wanted to take revenge on society, and newbies who thought they could easily escape surveillance. Xianxia's own strength was more than enough to deal with them, not to mention she had a full-time bodyguard. Anti-do? I'm just saying, I live a life in the classroom, library, home, and supermarket every day. I almost never attend parties or gatherings. Who would target me for no reason? As Xianxia spoke, she suddenly frowned and looked ahead. After pausing for a moment, she said, "Cheng, do you not know the way?" "Seems like we're driving the wrong way," Lu Qing answered calmly. "Yeah, it's my first time here. How could I know the way? Besides, who would remember the way in a car?" So self-righteous. Xianxia was stunned for a few seconds. When did we go the wrong way? We should have turned left at the intersection with the bridge. We passed that intersection before you mentioned the clown. Lu Qing thought for a moment and said with a strange expression, "When I was counting how many delivery men." Xianxia asked casually as she entered the map and planned to navigate. "No, it was even earlier." Lu Qing answered honestly. "When I said the delivery men appeared in the Big Apple again?" Xianxia blinked. "Even earlier." Lu Qing reminded her with a trembling expression. "Even earlier? Isn't that when I teach you how to drive?" Xianxia laughed out loud. If she had an emoji pack, she would definitely choose to slam the table. Even earlier. Lu Qing drove with a solemn expression. "Earlier? Then I'm not driving." Xianxia paused and thought for a moment. She raised her phone and cheered. "Just treat it as a drive. Isn't that great? But I'm hungry." Lu Qing nodded his head silently. In the riverside manner, Brandon pulled himself together and chatted with the guests. Although he didn't know that victory and defeat are common in war, his performance was very apartment. After the formalities, he used an excuse to change and went to the second floor. He saw his father, Adrian, standing at the balcony at the end of the corridor, looking at the flowing water. "How do you feel?" Adrian turned around and asked. Brandon took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "Stronger than me." Adrian nodded slightly and added calmly, "And he looks like he's experimenting and practicing the new ice sect technique." Brandon didn't want to admit it, but he answered honestly. "Yes." A smile appeared on Adrian's face as he spoke calmly. "You have to remember that there aren't many people who can become a martial artist's lifelong enemy. Among them there are bound to be arrogance and conceit." February 1st, Sunday afternoon. Lu Qing, who had completed his daily training, and xianxia, who had finished her homework, drove to the biggest supermarket nearby to buy ingredients and daily necessities for the Chinese New Year. After filling up 2 cars, they stopped at the cashier and took out the items one by one to pay for them. Xianxia watched as her husband busied himself. She helped him from time to time, looking relaxed and comfortable. She even started thinking about the dishes for their reunion dinner. At that moment, she saw Lu Qing take out 6 boxes with a calm expression and pass them to the cashier. She didn't know how many boxes of condoms they contained. When did he take them? How can he just buy them like that? Xianxia was stunned. Her cheeks were burning. She quickly turned her head to the side and pretended not to know the guy in front of her. Why couldn't he just be like before and come here to buy it on his own? After paying the bill and exiting the supermarket, Xianxia glared at Lu Qing in embarrassment. "You're getting better at it." "What?" Lu Qing was confused. That. Xianxia pointed at the boxes on top. Lu Qing broke into laughter and answered calmly, "It's not my first time. Besides, it's normal for a married man with a wife to buy condoms. What's there to be embarrassed about?" "That's not what you said before. You said you were so embarrassed when you bought condoms for the first time." Xianxia sadly realized that a man's skin was the most thick-skinned thing. After joking around for a while, they put their spoils of war into the car. Just as Xianxia was about to start the engine, her phone rang. She had an incoming call. After a while, she pressed down on the receiver and looked at Lu Qing. "The consulate and the International Student Union want to organize a celebration for the Chinese New Year. Do you want to join? Chinese New Year is my birthday too." Lu Qing took the initiative to express his opinion. "Of course, it's just the 2 of us." Xianxia smiled and didn't say anything else. She rejected the invitation. Chapter 529. After returning home from the supermarket, Lu Qing and Xianxia started to get busy. They first planned the menu for the next 2 days and then put on a show like Mandarin duck chopping pork with 2 knives. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Xianxia carefully put the pork belly mixed with eggs, starch and other things into the wok and fried it until it was golden. She then took it out and threw it into the bowl beside her. Then a hand filled with frost reached out like lightning and grabbed the pork belly. She took 2 bites and felt the fragrance and tenderness of the meat. "It's delicious," Lu Qing said vaguely. He then put the remaining half of the piece in front of the girl's mouth. "Try it." This was the must-have crispy pork in Xiaoxuan. The selection of ingredients and cooking method were slightly different from other places. It was more tender and smooth but also easier to get tired of. Even with Lu Qing's appetite, it was difficult to eat more than 10 pieces in a row. He had to eat other food to neutralize it. Crispy pork was the most delicious when it was just out of the pot. When his family was not very rich, he would stay by the stove and eat every piece until his mouth was full of oil and his stomach was full and he felt disgusted. Then he left reluctantly. Although Xianxia didn't like greasy food, she didn't dislike the freshly fried crispy pork at all. However, she could only eat 2 pieces at most. The alluring aroma and delicious taste were one of the New Year's delicacies in her hometown. After the first meal, the crispy pork could be kept in the refrigerator for a long time. Every time Lu Cheng's mother, Qi Fang, made tofu and vegetable soup, she liked to add a few pieces of crispy pork and add some oil and gas to make it more fragrant. At that time, the crispy pork was not as greasy as before. Xianxia opened her mouth slightly and took a bite of the crispy pork Lu Cheng handed to her. She chewed a little and smiled, praising herself. "It's really good. I can do this with just a recipe and a few words from Empress Dowager. Please call me Chef Yan." She was more confident and put another piece of pork belly into the pot. Lu Cheng quickly blocked the splashing oil droplets with his palm and eliminated all hidden dangers. They cooked and tasted and cooked. When they filled the table with dishes, they were already half full. I'm so tired. I don't want to cook unless it's a holiday. Xianxia stretched her arms and said half proudly and half with emotion. Lu Qing immediately reached out his hand and helped her massage. He echoed with a smile and said, "That's right. In the future we'll hire an auntie who knows how to cook. When we feel like it, we'll make it ourselves. But it's not bad to see you busying around and finding opportunities to eat from time to time." Xianxia lifted the glass of juice and extended it to Lu Qing. Her dimples were outlined as she said with a sweet smile, "This is our first big meal for ourselves." To Chef Yan and Chef Lu. Lu Qing also picked up his glass. In Xing province, Dunzi was the sous chef in charge of cutting and garnishing vegetables. Ding dang. The wine glasses clinked and the water swirled. The young couple each took a sip. They felt that the surroundings were very quiet and the light was very soft. Their hearts were very warm. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Lu Qing took on the role of the main force. Under the disturbance of Xianxia, who seemed to be drunk from drinking fruit juice, he managed to clean up the dining room and kitchen. Back on the second floor, the two lay on the bed very close to each other and chatted endlessly. Occasionally they would surf the internet to find something to talk about. Even time seemed to slow down. Lu Qing's cell phone rang from time to time. They were all congratulatory messages for his birthday. Based on the reality that China was 12 or 13 hours earlier, he had entered the first day of his 21st birthday in China. However, the young couple was still stubbornly waiting for the arrival of midnight in Connecticut. At 11:30, Xianxia suddenly stretched out her leg and nudged Lu Qing. "Qing, you go take a shower first. It's almost 12. I'll go after that." Lu Qing answered with a little confusion. Go, take a shower first. You stink." Xianxia used both hands and feet to drive him out of the bed with an itchy expression on her face. Is this the rhythm of a surprise gift? Lu Qing's heart skipped a beat. He deeply felt that he was really unromantic just now. Okay. He pretended to be helpless and slow. He took a change of clothes and walked out of the room to the bathroom. After 2 steps, his ears moved slightly. He heard the sound of the door closing and locking. That's it. Lu Qing entered the bathroom with a face full of joy. He rubbed left and right, slowed down the pace and hummed a song. 20 minutes later, he walked out of the bathroom refreshed and returned to the bedroom door. He stretched out his hand and twisted the doorknob, but it didn't move an inch. He knocked on the door and called in a confused tone. Wait a little longer. The girl's voice sounded slightly urgent. Okay. Lu Qing smiled to himself and waited patiently. He silently counted the time and scattered his thoughts, guessing what kind of gift he was about to receive. At 11:59, he heard the sound of the lock being unlocked and Xianxia taking a few steps back. Come in. The girl's voice was a little tense. Okay. Lu Qing took a breath and reached for the doorknob. He gently twisted it and pushed the door open. The lights in the room were off. The curtains were drawn, and the dim yellow candlelight was rippling. In the quiet darkness, Xianxia wore a white fluttering veil and a wedding dress that outlined her beautiful curves. The layers of lace were faintly discernible, making her look as pure and beautiful as an angel descending from heaven. At this moment she was holding a homemade cream cake in her hands. There were 21 candles on the cake, and the light from the candles flickered like a soul. Seeing Lu Qing's stunned face, the girl was a little embarrassed and forgot to say happy birthday. She raised her chin and said, I ordered the dress. We haven't taken wedding photos yet. Yeah. Lu Qing replied with lingering eyes. Xianxia pursed her lips and smiled. She looked at the ceiling and said, Then I'll invite you to take the photos tomorrow. There's no class this afternoon. We'll go to Left Lake Pier, Riverside Park, Wilson Square, Adams Garden, and Westminster Building. Yes, we'll take the photos ourselves. You've already prepared the strategy? Lu Qing seemed to come back to himself and asked subconsciously. Shouldn't this kind of thing be done by me? Of course, Xianxia's voice rose at the end. She replied with a cheerful expression. This is your birthday present. Yes, I ordered a full suit for you including a shirt, vest, bow tie, belt, shoes. When we go back to China during the summer vacation, we'll make a Han costume for the second set. Here, try it on. She turned around and walked to the wardrobe as if she was going to take out the suit that belonged to Lu Qing. However, before she could take a step forward, an arm wrapped around her waist. A strong body pressed against her back, and a slightly hot breath brushed past her ear. Then we can try it on tomorrow? Lu Qing said in a low voice. Sure enough. You big pervert. Xianxia smiled slyly. She turned around as if she had been prepared. She raised the cake in her hand and was about to slap it in the face of the rogue to wish him a happy birthday. Her turning around and the words of trying on the dress were all targeted traps. Lu Qing had already sensed the girl's intention. He shook his head in amusement and chose not to dodge. Seeing this, Xianxia slowed down her movements and stopped the cake. She muttered, "Can't waste food." After that, she smiled widely and looked into Lu Qing's eyes with watery eyes. She said in a low voice, "Qing, happy birthday." Huh? Lu Qing raised his eyebrows and snorted. Xianxia bit her lips and said again with shame and anger in her eyes, "Hubby, happy birthday." Huff. Lu Qing reached out his right hand and hugged his wife. He blew out the candles with his breath. The room was dark with only a little light coming in from outside the window. "Be careful of my clothes." Her voice echoed in the room. Lu Qing completely forgot to savor the fact that he was 1 year older. The next morning, Xianxia brushed her teeth angrily. She watched the energetic Lu Qing finish his training and enter the bathroom to wash off the sweat on his body. He was full of satisfaction. "I was just being polite. I said it's your birthday and you can do whatever you want. You actually took it seriously." "Humph, I'll have to tell you the truth later." "Why do you know so much?" "Someone is really diligent in this aspect. I wonder what kind of state he is in when I'm not around." While Xianxia was lost in her thoughts, they tidied themselves up and returned to the room. They started a video call with their parents and elders to congratulate them on the new year. First was Ji Mingyu, followed by the 2 elders of the Ji family and the Yen family. When Xianxia finished with her red eyes, Lu Qing called her over to talk to his parents. "Mom, Dad, Ku is here." Lu Qing reminded them with a smile. "Mom, Dad." Xianxia, who was a little absent-minded and a little sentimental, followed suit. Then she suddenly sobered up and blushed. Resisting the urge to turn around and run away, she murmured, "Uncle, Auntie?" The 3 members of the Lu family all laughed heartily. Instead of making fun of this matter, they started to talk about other topics. Xianxia listened to them with a gentle smile. She reached her hand behind Lu Qing's back and pinched him again and again. However, her heart softened and she didn't use any strength. In a cheerful atmosphere, the couple started a new day. First, they listened to lectures. Then they went to the Left Lake Pier for dinner. They went on a date to take wedding photos. Although they weren't skillful enough, they were full of memories. These were not only stored in the camera but also in their minds. In the evening, the tired, only Xianxia, but excited couple returned home. They cooked a table full of New Year's Eve dishes and swept everything away like a hurricane. After that, they curled up together and waited for the midnight of Connecticut again. Xianxia fell into a deep sleep. Lu Qing turned his head and looked at her with a smile in his eyes. When it was close to dawn, he woke her up. He shook his left hand and sprinkled a sky full of sparkles. There was a little flame hidden in every sparkle. There was no exception. "New Year's Eve. Firecrackers!" Lu Qing shouted in a low voice. His face was full of smiles. In his mind flashed the upcoming National League and the professional circle he would join in the second half of the year. Xianxia looked at him in a daze. Her eyes were full of brilliance and brilliance. A new year, a new beginning. Only we are no longer alone. Chapter 530. For the next 10 days or so, Lu Qing, who had learned a lot from his match with Brandon, laid low. He didn't even look for grandmasters of martial arts or powerful spirit cultivators to spar during the weekend. Instead, he pondered seriously and made up for his mistakes bit by bit. Among them, his self-created Lament of the Ice Queen was still a distance away from the harsh requirements of actual combat. If he hadn't completely suppressed Brandon, he might not have been able to use it in time. He had to experiment, modify and familiarize himself with it. Without relying on the suppression of the power of the Jin Dan, the Lament of the Ice Queen was equivalent to severe warning. However, there was an internal and external difference. One froze one's mind while the other froze one's body. Both had their own characteristics, mysteries and advantages. Thoughts flashed through his mind. He leaned against a corner and looked at the classroom. While keeping an eye out for any accidents, he pondered over similar questions. At this moment, his phone suddenly vibrated twice. He picked it up and saw that it was a WeChat message from Smith. He used someone else's email account to contact Lu Qing for confidential information and then cleaned it up afterward. Normally, he would rely on Chinese communication tools. It was as though they had established a true friendship through daily contact. "Lu, there's going to be an exciting movie today. If I hadn't been monitoring the vicinity of the Holy Top Church from afar, I wouldn't have noticed Pavel sneaking out during the busiest time of the day. It's almost Valentine's Day, so he might not be able to hold it in." "Pavel, that perverted bishop who loves children and girls?" Lu Qing asked a few questions out of curiosity. He roughly understood what Smith meant by exciting movie. The Deliverman's first two cases were the arrest of Joseph of the Jiruga sect and the righteous execution of Mizuki, who had a close relationship with spirit cultivators. The two spirit cultivators belonged to the Kagri group of the Jiruga sect. All in all, the higher-ups of the Jiruga sect couldn't help but suspect that the Deliverman was targeting them. Even though he had punished criminals a few more times, it was probably just a cover-up. As for who would target the Jiruga sect of the Nature sect, the Mission sect was definitely in the top 3 suspects. They had sufficient resources and ability to transfer mighty ones from other big cities to interfere with surveillance and erase suspicion. Furthermore, their holy light could easily disguise itself as a superpower of flames and explosions. After the Butcher incident, the Mission's quick response and relentless pursuit of public opinion made the higher-ups of the Jiruga sect feel that they had grasped the truth. As a warning and revenge, they set their sights on Pavel, who was also responsible for a case and angered the public. In the past few months, Smith had accidentally discovered that the Jiruga sect was paying attention to Pavel while the superheroes. Now that this disgusting and detestable bishop had taken the opportunity to sneak out during the superheroes' most, he didn't escape from the enemy. He couldn't help but be happy for him. Most importantly, he didn't the Deliverman. And of course, Lu. For him was Lu. Of by words. By for sure Smith. Of the by. Of. To of course to of by. By bit. Wearing a bonnet, Pavel crossed the street and entered the Black Forest. His eyes wandered around, looking for prey in a relatively secluded spot. When he came to an open space filled with building debris, his eyes suddenly flashed. Everything turned white, like a person who was used to the dark suddenly looking straight at the noon sun. A figure jumped down from the top of the debris pile. Raising his right arm, he clenched his fist and swung it fiercely amidst the light. It was like a giant sword slashing but also like a giant hammer smashing. Bam! A few stars around Pavel exploded, forming a strange, incomplete tree. With the guidance of the Lord, he accurately swung his fist and blocked the fatal attack. Bam bam bam. Rumble rumble rumble. Amidst the fierce fight, the open space trembled constantly, as if it was brewing anger. In the center, fireworks bloomed brighter and brighter. The dark-skinned teenagers playing nearby were scared out of their wits. Some called the police while others hid in their homes. Due to the slow dispatch of police from the slums, the attacker didn't seem to be anxious or worried at all. It's a pity that the surveillance cameras nearby are either broken or stolen. Holding his phone, Smith shook his head and sighed. He parked his car not far away and, under the cover of a pile of junk, enjoyed the dangerous battle. He even took a video and sent it to Lu Cheng for communication. Lu Cheng leaned against the wall and glanced at the screen from the corner of his eyes. He saw the outline of the holy light in the shape of a tree or a cross. He saw the condensed brilliance, the trajectory of both parties' punches, and their dodging and evasive maneuvers. The ice mirror appeared in his mind as he deduced and predicted what would happen next. A thought flashed through his mind. Looking at the classroom, Lu Cheng blindly typed a word and sent it to Smith. Jump. Smith picked up his phone and fell into a state of confusion. He didn't understand the true meaning of Lu. At this moment, Lu Cheng's second message followed. Jump. Jump. Smith was stunned at first, then subconsciously believed in authority. He pushed open the car door and threw himself to the side. With a roll, he hid behind a house. He saw a ball of fire flying from the battlefield, smashing through the front windshield of the car and smashing into the seat where he was sitting 10 seconds ago. Boom. A dull thud resounded, waves of fire splattered, and glass flew everywhere. Smith couldn't care less about the surveillance cameras. He felt fear and relief at the same time. Although such an attack couldn't kill him, it wasn't easy to bear either. Having an extremely dangerous friend wasn't necessarily a bad thing. After a brief moment of shock, he reported the incident to the Department of Homeland Security as an agent who happened to pass by. But by the time the reinforcements arrived, the battle was already over. With the appearance of a helper who seemed to be a spirit cultivator, the attacker finally finished off Pavel, destroyed the corpse and traces of the crime scene and left. The government has to issue a warning to Jiruga and the church. They should be quiet for a long time after this. Smith sent a message to Lu Cheng as he reported the losses. As someone who leaned towards justice and law enforcement, he didn't hand over the video he took. It's best if people like Pavel are dead. On the way home after school, Xianxia listened to Lu Cheng's description of the incident while driving. Her eyes widened. You can already predict the development of the battle 20 seconds later? Provided there are no changes. Who knows what other tricks those two guys have up their sleeves? Lu Qing smiled calmly. In other words, you're at most 60 to 70% sure. If there are any changes, wouldn't spiders jump be in vain? Xianxia was half enlightened and half confused. Jumping won't kill you. Lu Qing chuckled, not minding it at all. Spider lacks actual combat experience. It's not bad to do some vigorous exercise once in a while. Valentine's Day was also the second anniversary of Lu Qing and Xianxia's relationship. The girl received a pair of resplendent earrings and a photo album. A photo album? Xianxia was surprised, happy, and confused. She took it and placed it on her lap. On the cover of the album was the words, "A gift from time," handwritten by someone. Handwriting? I won't comment on the handwriting. The girl chuckled and opened the album. The first page was of the exterior of the martial arts arena, the second page was of Weishui Lake, and the third page was of Long Bridge at night. Every page was a scene she was extremely familiar with. At the end of the page were the suspended glass bridges and other sights they had experienced before. You've been there before? Xianxia looked up and asked in surprise and delight. Before you went abroad, didn't you especially like to take photos to record the things we experienced together? I wanted to make up for the earlier ones. Although we're not in the photos, it can be our background now. Lu Qing explained with a smile. Xianxia's eyes lit up. She lowered her head and stroked the surface of the photo. Her dimples were shallow. Your photography skills are a little bad, but since you put in so much effort, I'll reluctantly accept it. Do you like it? Lu Qing asked with a smile. Xianxia rolled her eyes and glared at him. She turned her head to the side and answered softly, I like it very much. After that, she changed the topic and showed a nostalgic expression. I kinda miss the cafeteria of Songqing University. I still remember the shredded pork with fish with shredded onions and the boiled meat slices with a spoon of boiling oil. It was so tender. The dishes in Songqing University's cafeteria were not bad, especially the shredded pork with fish with shredded pork. It was a dish that Lu Qing and Xianxia couldn't stop praising. It wasn't worse than some of the time-honored restaurants in Xing province. The only problem is that there are too many fish in Weishui Lake. Most of the dishes in the cafeteria are fish. Lu Qing complained and then recalled the food. The more they thought about it, the more hungry they became. At the end of the conversation, Xianxia touched her stomach, which was still a little painful because of her period, and looked at Lu Qing with grievance. Qing, I just checked Weibo and saw a person's nickname is Country Bumpkin. And then? Lu Qing asked in confusion. And then I want to eat buns. Xianxia covered her face with her hands. After Valentine's Day, Lu Qing waited for Aunt Du to call off her leave. He carried his luggage and boarded the flight back to China. The national competition was in a little more than a month. P.S. Looking for recommendation tickets on Monday, monthly tickets.